listener production. Hey, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Is buying organic really worth your money? And how can we know if something is actually certified organic or if we're being greenwashed?
It's really important as a shopper. You shouldn't have to be a scientist. You shouldn't have to be an expert in certification systems.
That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Tuesday, January 14.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. We kick things off at the Australian Open today, where Nick Kyrgios seems to have caught time on his singles career, saying he's unlikely to play at Melbourne Park again.
I didn't want to just throw in the towel and walk off or retire or, I was hurting physically, but I'd respect my opponent, the fans that waited hours to come see me play. Yeah, realistically, I probably can't see myself playing a singles match here again.
His comments come after he crashed out in the opening round to Brit Jacob Fernley. Kyrgios, who hasn't played a Grand Slam in 2 years due to injury, says he will see out the rest of the year's Grand Slam season with a particular focus on Wimbledon and, of course, doubles in the AO with fellow Aussie Thanasi Kokkinakis.
Yeah, Kokkinakis was among 8 other Aussies who will be advancing to round 2 of the tournament after securing a win yesterday.
And that is a victory of resilience and self-belief.
Also on the list is former prodigy Destiny Iava, who bagged her first Grand Slam match win yesterday. She joins James McCabe, Alexander Vukic, Isla Tomjanovic, Talia Gibson, Tristan Skulkate, James Duckworth, and Jordan Thompson. Seeing another day is 10-time champ Novak Djokovic, who pulled off a comeback after losing his first set to 19-year-old Nishesh Basavireddy from the States. It was his first victory under new coach Andy Murray.
Yeah, someone who can't say the same, though, is Stefanos Tsitsipas, who lost to 20-year-old Alex Mickelson, also from the States, in what's been dubbed a major upset. Hey, Sash, today is day 3 of the AO. There will be 8 Aussies hitting the court today. So on that list is rising star 16-year-old Emerson Jones. She'll be playing. We also have Alex de Minaur, Alexei Popyrin and Rinky Hijikata.
Anti-Semitism is shaping up to be a key issue in this year's federal election as a federal MP calls for mandatory jail sentences for people who vandalise synagogues and other Jewish property. Julian Leeser, the Liberal member for Berowra, has called on the Prime Minister to convene an emergency meeting to develop new laws to clamp down on anti-Semitism. And this, of course, follows a string of incidents across Sydney and Melbourne. Meantime, the opposition leader has called into question Anthony Albanese's record on the issue in what is already becoming an increasingly personal election campaign, Chris. Peter Dutton yesterday criticised the PM for failing Australia's Jewish population. He also labelled him the weakest leader in the country's history.
Yeah, when Albo was voted in, he promised to do politics differently and move away from personal attacks and culture wars, but he dipped his toe into it yesterday.
Peter Dutton represents a cold-hearted, mean-spirited, sometimes just plain nasty response.
The PM speaking on the ABC there also announced yesterday a plan by Labor to finish the NBN with a $3 billion funding pledge and a promise from the coalition to force councils to hold citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day.
Yeah, and that's that exact culture wars issue because Peter Dutton, with that announcement, is essentially trying to clamp down on any sort of discussion about changing the date or acknowledging that for a huge chunk of the population, especially Australia's Indigenous population, it's seen as a day of mourning and it's Invasion Day to them. So the fact that he is going to force councils to do this and essentially start participating in Australia Day commemorations on January 26th, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and like you said, anti-Semitism as well is shaping up to be a huge issue this election time. So if you do want to find out more about the politics behind it and what leading Jewish voices feel and think about it, you can just search anti-Semitism in your feed, and we have a 2-parter that we published back in December.
Sticking with politics, but heading over to the US now, where it looks like JD Vance has started walking back a key Trump election pledge. In the lead up to the November vote, the president-elect had promised repeatedly to pardon most, if not all, the people charged and convicted over their involvement in the January 6 Capitol riots. But the incoming vice president has appeared to backtrack on that, telling Fox News only people who protested peacefully should have their convictions overturned.
If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law.
This is the third major election promise that Trump has initiated a retreat on. He's spoken publicly about the fact that lowering grocery prices will prove extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible. While at a press conference last week, the president-elect told reporters it could take 6 months to end the war in Ukraine. Importantly, he had pledged to have it sorted within 24 hours of taking office, Sash.
While we're in the US, a quick update as well on what's happening in LA with the fires. So authorities are still bracing for those strengthening winds that were expected to hit around today. So it's currently, at the time of recording, it's Monday afternoon in LA. Officials there have laid out a plan to try to lessen the impact of the weather change, and they're promising that they're better prepared this time. The death toll has now risen to 24. Dozens more are still missing, so that death toll is expected to continue to rise. And the total area burned by the Palisades, Eaton and Hearst fires is about 155 square kilometres, which is an area larger than Paris.
And climate activists have vandalised the grave of Charles Darwin at London's Westminster Abbey. The two women from Just Stop Oil wrote 1.5 is dead on the naturalist's gravestone, a reference to recent news that global temperatures in 2024 exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial era for the first time. They've since been arrested, and the Abbey is confident there won't be any permanent damage to the site.
Yeah, I feel like it's just part and parcel of like going anywhere that's like a major tourist attraction in Europe at the moment. That there might be orange paint splashed on your favourite thing.
Yeah.
When I was in Germany in 2023, the Brandenburg Gate, which is in Berlin, was still showing the signs of Just Stop Oil protesters who'd thrown the orange paint all over it. We know that they've damaged paintings and, you know, they sit down and start yelling about stuff. Darwin, of course, is best known for his theory of evolution by natural selection. He died in 1882 and he's buried at Westminster Abbey in what's called the Scientists' Corner Crypt, which I'm annoyed I didn't visit when I went to the Abbey. Isaac Newton and Stephen Hawking are also buried there.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I really like that little factoid. Well done.
Enjoy. Take it into your day. All right, thanks. It is time for Helen Smith's Deep Dive now, looking at whether we're being tricked or scammed when it comes to organic stuff.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with this episode of The Briefing. You probably think you're doing the right thing for yourself or the planet when you buy fruit, veg, eggs, chocolate, or shampoo with an organic sticker or logo. But what if you're being lied to and are paying extra for no reason at all? It's a $2.5 billion industry here in Australia, and insiders have accused producers of greenwashing and falsely labelling products. Organic farmers and retailers are saying Australians are being misled. And that's because a product with as little as 2% organic ingredients can be labelled and marketed in that way. The coalition is pushing the government to better regulate the sector, introducing a bill late last year. But what would that actually look like, and could it impact what's on our shelves? Erin Turner is the Chief Executive of the Consumer Policy Research Centre. Erin, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. Are we being lied to when we're buying a product that has an organic label on it?
Maybe. That's the really difficult thing to tell people who are shopping. Unlike other countries, there's no standard definition for what organic is in Australia, and there's no requirement for certification processes for anyone making an organic claim. So one company might have all of these rigorous processes behind it. They might be working with a certification organization doing all of this work to meet these really high standards. And another company might be doing a lot less than that. And there have been legal cases in the past. We've seen issues with organic eggs, with organic baby shampoo, where we've seen ACCC or the regulator take action because there were claims they were organic and then the company wasn't following through on that. So we've got this mess at the moment where there isn't a single definition, and it's really hard to know what you're getting when you pay extra for that organic product.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get into that legislation a little bit later, but generally speaking, what makes a product organic?
This is actually where it's like, oh gosh, it's super technical. There's actually a lot of different ways to classify something as organic. There's 7 different certification processes you could go through in Australia, all with like slightly different technical things. But at a high level, it's something that is not using chemicals. It's not using pesticides or herbicides or things that you would call inorganic as part of the process to make that product or produce that food.
All right. So How can I tell if a product in Australia is organic? You've talked about a little bit of that criteria there. What does it have to pass to get that organic label?
So there are all these different ways that a company could go through and get a certification or say that they meet an organic standard or just call themselves organic. Now, companies aren't meant to lie to you. There's something in the law that says, yeah, companies can't mislead and deceive you. But I see cases every week where companies do mislead and deceive their customers. And it leaves shoppers in a really tricky situation. If you really want to go for organic products, you can look for certifications. ACO is one that's one of the biggest ones in Australia. But there's this push through the federal government that I think is a great idea to make one certification process mandatory. So it's really easy to understand that any company or product claiming to sell you something organic, it means the same thing. You can put these products side by side and know exactly what you're getting.
So why would someone pretend a product is organic when it isn't? Is this just a marketing ploy to get more money at the checkout?
Look, I mean, organic products typically cost more, so there's always an incentive there. But a lot of this is about the processes behind a company that's selling something as an organic product. There was this really interesting case that the ACCC took a little while ago about organic eggs. And this company was selling organic eggs for a while until there was a market shortage, and they started replacing their organic eggs in the organic labels with not so organic eggs. So this is where certification processes come in. Companies that are really doing the right thing and do go through that certification process have to have really rigorous requirements around them to prove that, yes, this is always organic all the time. We've got systems and processes, so when something goes on in the market, we're always selling something organic. And that's where that certification process becomes so important, because it's not, things happen. There are egg shortages in Australia right now. These things can hit a business at any time, but great businesses have systems and processes so that whatever you're buying, if it says it's organic, it should be organic.
Let's jump to greenwashing now. Some experts have accused companies of greenwashing when it comes to organic products. What is it, and is it actually happening?
There are companies greenwashing across Australia. And greenwashing can mean, it's a big term, right? It's about when a company implies or says something is more environmentally friendly than it is. And in our research at the Consumer Policy Research Centre, what we found is that there's actually a range of behaviours there. There's some companies that might be outright lying. They say it's one thing, it's actually another. But there's also some companies that just push the truth or are so vague that you think it sounds great, but actually there's nothing behind that green claim. We saw this a lot in some of our research, companies who said their product was greener or eco or clean. We had one company who said that their freezers were greener. I don't know if it was greener than the past fridge, other freezers in the market, on what measure they were using it. But these instant claims, they register in our brain as, oh, that must be good. But it actually doesn't have any detail behind it. And it makes it really hard as a shopper to know if you're, it's worth paying that little bit extra when you think you're doing the right thing for the environment. It's why we've been pushing for stronger laws and regulations for all kinds of terms. Organic's one of them, but also things like compostable, recyclable, carbon neutral. These terms can mean really different things. And it's really important as a shopper, you shouldn't have to be a scientist. You shouldn't have to be an expert in certification systems. It should be really easy for you to trust that the thing you're paying for is what you're getting.
Yeah, so let's talk about organic foods, for example. Do we ever really know where our food is coming from or what manufacturing steps it's been through before it gets to us on the shelves?
It's really hard to tell. Essentially, in legal terms, when you're buying something that's free range or organic or making any of those kind of big claims about the process, it's what we call a credence claim. You as the shopper can't tell. You're putting a lot of trust and faith in that company that they're following through. And that's why we argue that there should be clear laws and regulations. So it's really easy to know that, yes, organic is this high standard. It meets a certain requirement. The company's doing the right thing. And I can put two of these products side by side. Something we've seen in the compostable category, for example. You go down to certain supermarket aisles, you'll see compostable left, right, and center. Some of those products are compostable. You can walk out to your backyard, put it in your compost. Others are only compostable under really specific industrial situations. So just not something I will ever have access to at home. It won't break down in a period of time, I expect, even though it technically is scientifically compostable. That's not a comparison. These products look the same, but actually they're really, really different. And it's why labels should be for consumers. It should be for shoppers. And it should be much easier than it is to buy what you think you're buying.
Moving on to some of the legal stuff now. We know organic products in Australia that are exported need to be certified and are routinely audited. Why aren't the same standards applied to goods sold inside Australia?
Such a good question, because it should be, right? Anything we're sending out of the country has a higher standard than stuff you buy in, your supermarket down the road. This is one of those long-running issues. Australia actually has quite weak labelling laws compared to a lot of countries. So, for example, the US and Japan, they have requirements that restrict how the word organic is used. Over in the European Union, there's been recent reforms, so lots of different words related to greenwashing and green claims, like compostable, recyclable, organic, they have restrictions. In Australia, we have that big, broad law that says don't lie to people, which is great. It's excellent, but we need to get more specific to make it easier for shoppers.
Now, you mentioned a standard definition for organic in the proposed legislation. What else does it cover?
So it's as much about the definition of what something organic is as it is about the certification process. So all of those checks to make sure the company is always doing the right thing. So that could be annual audits, it can be processes and system checks. It should be, the company saying, yes, I do this, I have an employee checking that. And that's the really important stuff, to know that day by day, that quality is really consistent. This is a great idea. It's been long overdue. I think my only criticism of this proposed law is that I want it for other terms as well. It shouldn't just be organic. It should be about recyclable and compostable and biodegradable. There's lots of confusing terms in our supermarket, and we need to make it easier. We need to look to places like the European Union where they're doing this, and we could adapt it into Australia.
So do you think that this proposed legislation goes far enough?
I think this proposed legislation is excellent, but it's just the start. What we really need to do is make it really easy for people to find products that do what they think it will do, and to stamp out greenwashing across the board. We don't have any specific rules about greenwashing in Australia yet. This reform around organic goes a little bit of the way, but if you go to the supermarket, you go to the local shops, you'll see a lot of companies making a lot of big claims around broad environmental benefits. What we'd really love to see is something similar to what they've done in the EU and they're considering in other countries. We need to stop companies making vague claims. So this is good for the environment, no details, no reference to science, no comparison. And for those specific claims, like organic, like biodegradable, like compostable, that it really does mean something. You've got to make it clear and comparable. So, a compostable product A is exactly like compostable product B. You shouldn't be a scientist in the supermarket. You should just be a shopper.
At the top of the interview, you mentioned a few labels that we can trust. Just to wrap us up, what are some of those labels and logos that we can trust and know that we're actually buying organic?
Look, so there are a lot of businesses that are doing the right thing across the board. It is really hard to tell the difference between those and companies that aren't. But if you want a little bit more certainty, look for a product that is certified organic rather than just generally organic. You can look for certain logos and labels, anything that's got a little circle saying certified organic. That usually means they've gone through a process to say, yes, we're following the rules. We've got things behind us that mean that what you're buying is what you're getting.
Erin, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you for having me.
That was Erin Turner there, Chief Executive of the Consumer Policy Research Centre. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. It really does help us keep doing what we're doing here at The Briefing. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed this afternoon from 3. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.